Hello there, this is Craig Hain. My students call me Dr. Dell, and I want to talk to you today about my book Teaching Math, a high school math curriculum that works for all students. And however you've received this book, whether you got it in a CD, in a PDF format, or bought it in a Kindle, or bought the paperback version of it, there are 10 commitments that I want to make to you. The question I always have whenever I consider reading a book is, what am I going to get out of it? Why would I want to read this book? So I want to tell you 10 things that you should get out of this book, and if any of them interest you, then it's probably worth reading. The book is written for people that are interested in teaching mathematics at the high school and the middle school level, whether you're a parent or a teacher, or for that matter, if you're a student. And I want to talk about these commitments to you one at a time, so that's what this video is going to be about, the 10 commitments. Now, the first commitment is that I'm going to discuss with you and explain three indispensable components of what I call the effective math education triad. And this will transform a high percentage of our students from math failures, meaning they're not really doing well in math, into math successes. And in fact, that 80% number could be much higher. As a matter of fact, have never had a failure with any student that is willing to really work at math. So the only students that aren't going to succeed are those that refuse to work at it for whatever reason, or maybe if they have a severe learning disability, which very few students do. Now, that's discussed thoroughly in Chapter 2 of the book, and this is the first page of Chapter 2. And it's all based on a triad concept, and there are three components to it, and that's what you're going to learn about in Chapter 2. The next thing that I want to discuss with you, next commitment, is I'm going to give you the three reasons that I believe that our current standard math curriculum is failing our students and what we can do about it. Now, this is, as I'll explain very clearly in Chapter 1, which is where I discuss this initially in an overview viewpoint, is it's not the fault of our teachers. It's really not the fault of anyone in particular. It's the way our system has evolved. And I explain right on page 1 of Chapter 1 that the reason that our curriculum is failing today is that, first of all, it's too compartmentalized. And I discuss that in detail in this book and explain why that is, as well as in some of the videos that are on the CD if you have them. Our current curriculum does not utilize the power tools of math properly, and there's a whole chapter on that. And it also is not interactive and self-paced enough, and there's chapters on that as well. But this is an overview chapter of why it's failing, and that'll give you an idea if you read Chapter 1, which is about 10 or 12 pages long, as to whether or not you agree with what I'm saying and are really interested then in going forward in the book. Now, it turns out that there is a gaping hole in our current math curriculum also, and this is handicapping those students that are going to become future engineers and scientists. And I talk about what that hole is and how to fill it. And I do that in Chapter 5, along with other discussions about our 21st century math curriculum. As a matter of fact, what I do in Chapter 5 is I describe for you what I consider to be a modern 21st century math curriculum that will indeed work for all students, both students that are slow and students that are advanced. And this gaping hole then is for a certain subset of those students. Now, to really learn modern math properly in this 21st century, you need to begin to learn how to use the power tools of math. And in Chapter 3, I discuss 4 power tools of mathematics that a student ought to learn, particularly those that are going to go on into science and engineering. We start off in the very beginning, as you'll learn in our foundation course, which is for all students, with the very first power tool, which is the scientific calculator, which we talk a lot about, and of which, of course, you need to first teach your students to use if they're going to be successful with it. But there are 3 more power tools that you need to know about if you don't know about them, and one of them is remarkable. It was only introduced in 2009, and that's all discussed in Chapter 3. The fifth commitment to you is I'm going to tell you about 4 amazing resources that are excellent for both students and teachers that will help amplify our math teaching powers in this 21st century. And that's covered in Chapter 4, and I talk about those remarkable resources. Now, there's more than just these 4, but these are the 4 primary resources that I'm going to recommend for you to rely on. In Chapter 5, I'm going to describe for you a modern 21st century math curriculum that is vastly superior to the current curriculum that we have, which I call our old-fashioned curriculum. And unfortunately, it's what most of our students are receiving today. And I discussed this again in Chapter 5. I mentioned that earlier when I talked about the gaping hole, which is just one of the minor problems of our 21st century curriculum. The major problems are the things I alluded to before. It's compartmentalization and the way it is delivered. And so this will be a chapter that will be very interesting to you if you're interested in our high school math curriculum and what can be done about it. It's easy to criticize something, but I actually then recommend to you one that I believe is vastly superior. Now that was the sixth commitment. The seventh commitment is a problem that we have with our educational delivery system. It's really archaic and outdated, and it's very inefficient and very expensive. And so I'm going to tell you about a 21st century educational delivery system that is much better and is much more cost effective. This ought to be of great concern to both parents and teachers and even high school administrators because of the cost effective component of it. And so I will tell you about how I believe we can deliver a vastly superior math curriculum to our students today with this new delivery system. In Chapter 8, I'm going to talk to those of you that wonder, well, how important is mathematics in our modern economy and in our society? And I call this chapter the matheracy imperative. And I put quotes around the word matheracy because I made up that word, obviously. Another word that is similar that I made up is called matherate. Now that is a takeoff on the word literate. And what I point out in Chapter 8 is why it's critical that many of our citizens in this new 21st century economy become matherate. Literacy was adequate and appropriate for our last economy and the old economy we had, but the new economy, we must also include matheracy, or have our students become matherate. And indeed, if a student becomes matherate, they then can go on and learn the things they need to do to earn a very, very good living. And I talk a lot about that. We live in a day of economic turmoil and a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of discouragement. And I believe that mathematics, for many people, can be the solution to this problem and get them out of the bind that they're in. In my ninth commitment, I actually talk specifically about the finances that's going on in our schools today. And everybody knows today that our high schools and our public schools are in great financial crisis. Well, the things I've been talking about, our new math delivery system and our new way of teaching mathematics, can actually go a long way towards solving that problem. There is, in fact, financial salvation for our high schools and ways we can dramatically reduce our cost of delivering education while at the same time improving it. That's all in Chapter 7. Now, in Chapter 10, I have a chapter that's really aimed at those parents and teachers that have a student that is very talented in math and ambitious in math and might want to go on and become a professional mathematician. We're really, really shortchanging those students with our current curriculum. And I talk all about this in Chapter 10, and I tell you what can be done about it and a solution to that problem. And so Chapter 10 is a difficult chapter for non-mathematicians or people that don't know much math, but it's very important for those people that are involved with a student that is really, really quite good. And then there's an 11th commitment that I can tell you about in this book for math teachers per se. For people that are really teaching math or are very interested in teaching math. Scattered throughout this book, Teaching Math, are 6 what I call interludes. And each one of these interludes talks about some aspect of math education that I am applying in the programs I'm recommending to you. Now, the first 4 interludes, in fact, talk about examples that would discuss the pedagogy and the content that we actually use in the foundation course, which you'll learn a lot about in the book. It's actually the first 2 tiers of a 10-tier program. And I believe that these interludes will help any math teacher today do a better job of teaching math, whether you use any of the materials that we are producing or not, but just by learning about them. And so those interludes were in the book for that reason. And as a matter of fact, the third interlude actually, each one of the interludes has a video, by the way, that you get a link to. And the third interlude has 5 videos that actually are quite interesting, I believe, to anybody who's teaching geometry today. And I would almost guarantee you that you're going to learn things you don't know from these 5 videos. In fact, if you're not currently teaching Heron's formula and Brahmagupta's formula and explaining that in your program, then probably you'll enjoy these videos. Now, interludes 5 and 6 actually discuss this gaping hole I alluded to earlier in an earlier chapter that's in our current mathematics curriculum. and it's all about complex numbers. And so I discussed that very briefly in interludes 5 and 6. Now, if you have the CD that has this book on it as a PDF, I also have a video that's called the Interlude Overview. And that is actually very interesting because there I reveal a couple of guiding principles that I followed throughout the teaching of math in the foundation course. And these are very important pedagogical principles that we use, and I think that you'll learn from them if you're a teacher. And so this would be the first of the interlude videos before you watch the 6 interlude videos. Well, that then, kind of in a nutshell, are the 10 commitments that we're making to you if you choose to read this book, Teaching Math. The book is only about 120 pages long. Depends on your background. You can probably read it in a couple of sittings, although there's probably a lot of material in it that you'll want to think about a lot longer than that. And so I highly encourage you, if any of these things resonated with you, to get yourself a copy of this book in some format or other. As a matter of fact, you can get this book in PDF format on a CD, and you can actually, at this point in time, get it for free if you simply pay the shipping and handling and the production costs of it. And so you can go to our website, which is at Triad Math Inc., and learn a lot more about this. And hopefully you'll get a copy of this book and you'll be interested in some of these commitments and you will learn from that. So in the meantime, this is Dr. Dell, and I hope that you join me in this crusade to vastly improve the high school mathematics that we're delivering to our students today.